Welcome to the Cathedral's podcast, Crossroads. We explore the intersection of faith and the world in thought-provoking bi-monthly episodes featuring guests from around the world who are seeking to live faithfully in the public square. This is a safe space for tough questions around faith, politics, science, technology, and our responsibilities as citizens. Please join us as we search for a better way forward. On this episode of Crossroads, I'm fortunate enough to be in conversation with Bogdan Klich, head of mission at the Embassy of the Republic of Poland, to reflect on the pro-democratic opposition movement in communist Poland during the 1970s and 1980s. Ambassador Klich was deeply involved in this movement and was, for a short time, imprisoned by the communist regime. Together, we will explore themes of civic leadership and the place of faith in moments of personal and historical significance. We are fortunate today to have a conversation with someone I admire greatly, who is a wonderful friend to this cathedral, Dr. Bogdan Adam Klich, who is currently the interim charge d'affaires from Poland to the United States. And Bogdan, it has been wonderful to get to know you and to have some great conversations. And I thought that our audience would be interested not only in who you are and the many things you have accomplished, but also some of your history and some of the things that you have experienced. Let me share with you folks a little bit about Bogdan. He is a graduate of the Medical University of Krakow. He had completed studies in the history of art help me pronounce that.
Jagiellonian University.
Jagiellonian University, and then pursued doctoral studies in historical philosophy and in the Faculty of Philosophy and History. Bogdan, you have been a public servant all of your adult life. I know that your public service, so to speak, began at a very difficult time in Poland when the communist rule was coming to an end and democracy was on the rise, but not yet. I would love for you to tell our folks, so many people, I remember it well as a teenager, those final years, but so many people were not alive in those days. Tell us a little bit about what it was like for you as a young man getting involved in the democracy movement.
With pleasure. But first of all, let me say that I appreciate this opportunity to be here and to talk to you and to our audience. It's a great place here, not far from the residence of the ambassador of Poland. So I really love to be here. Returning to your basic question, I would say that I don't remember actually the beginning of my previous life without involvement in public life. At the beginning, it was involvement in the public life because there was no place for politics at that time. I mean, at the end of 70s, in which, let's say, independent groups, independent individuals could be involved. So when I was 17, there was an important event in Poland commemorating one of the students that was killed by the Secret Service in my hometown in Krakow. And after this episode, there were massive demonstrations of students there. So it was the first moment, in which I understood that we are not only individuals, but there are groups of young people who were against, the communist rule. So I decided, with a group of my friends, to join them, and we created a kind of division of the dissident movement in Poland. Because not only in Russian Federation, but also in Poland, in Czech Republic, in Czechoslovakia at that time, there were dissident groups. We didn't believe at that time that such a dissident movement could be replaced by a huge solidarity movement that emerged after the strikes in 1980. So this
Solidarność,
yes. Solidarność, not only the trade union. It was, in fact, the popular movement involving those who wanted either to reform the communist state and economy or to change it, to replace it with the democracy and basic freedoms. But at that time, between 1977 and the year 1980, was crucial, for a part of my generation, because this generation totally rejected the communist ideology. Frankly speaking, that ideology was not interesting for anybody at that time. Some of us rejected also all the temptations concerning with better life for those who were supporting the Communist Party. So there was no temptation to be involved at that time in the communist structures, but it was challenging to be involved in the opposition.
Was there poverty in Poland then? Was Poland suffering?
Frankly speaking, at the end of 70s, we had the beginning of the crisis. And one of the reasons for building solidarity, it was, not only to introduce basic freedoms in Poland and to reshape the communist system, but also to improve economic preconditions for the society. So before strikes, it was important to prepare such a base for those changes in our country that we didn't expect at all, I would say. It was very difficult to predict that there will be such a moment in which, Poland will be one of the leaders of Central Europe with this solidarity movement. But then, when solidarity movement emerged, I decided with a group of my friends to set up the student branch or dimension of that movement, and we organized the independent association of students that tried to carry on the basic activity concerning independence in our university.
And you were one of the founders of that, were you not?
Yes, it was, I would say, obvious that after such a beginning, of the new era in Poland, it was necessary to be a founder of such a movement. And then, unfortunately, there was a crash. It means that communists decided to impose the martial law, and in December 1981, we were arrested, and the majority of us spent a long time in prisons, in better or worse conditions. But I spent 10 months in the communist prison with a strong support, from my friends, of course, from the family, from medical university as well.
Did you feel at that time, forgive me for interrupting, but when you were arrested and being held, did it feel at that time like the movement was over, that the forces of communism and repression were winning? I mean, it must have been a very difficult time.
Frankly speaking, I didn't think about that. I was sure at that time, that if the state, if the ruling party uses the force against citizens, against a big part of the nation, it doesn't have any other arguments to convince the society and to be with the society. It means, that for me, it was the beginning of the end of the communist regime in Poland.
And did you know that when you were in prison? I mean, did you have that sense?
I had such a feeling.
Amazing.
I had such a feeling, because it was a military might used against own society. So it was not an intervention of Soviet troops,
right,
or Allied troops within the Warsaw Pact, but it was the intervention of military service, against people in Poland. So we did not know, of course, at that time how long it will last, but we believed, that during our life there will be a change, and it came, in 1989. There were several factors of this change. One of the most important, it was a basic change of the political system in Poland. It means that democracy replaced the communist autocracy. And it was our great success. Of course, this success, it was a period. It was a development, of political structures. So it is difficult to say right now if democracy in Poland was applied in 1989 or in 1990 or in 1991, because it was a process.
Do you remember a moment when you said to yourself, we're free?
Yeah, after the withdrawal of the last Soviet soldier from Poland.
When was that?
It was in 1993.
That was 93.
But, the beginning of this process was in June 1989, that we should celebrate in my country, as the victory of democracy because of the huge participation, huge turnout during this first parliamentary election. This process was began. So we voted, and let's say, without using force, we are ready to begin the process of democratic transformation in Poland. And it was a kind of model for other countries, not for all countries, because in Romania, for example, there was a clash between the ruling party and its elite and the society. But in countries like Poland, like Czechoslovakia, like Hungary, or eastern part of Germany, this round table symbol was the basic foundation, for the changes. So we appreciate everything, that was possible thanks to the willingness of the society, because it was a society, because these were people responsible for this democratic change. And of course, one of the most strategic challenges for the new government at that time was to create new structures, new economic structures in Poland. It means to reshape the former centralized economy and to change it into the social market economy. Social market economy, because there is still, a visible difference between economy here in the United States and this European model, in which the social aspect is still valid, important, and present in our market economy. But frankly speaking, it was one of the most painful reforms in Poland, but the society decided to accept that, including also the part of the post-communist circles that were invited, to support this crucial reform, because without them, it would be much more difficult to impose, those new structures. So this process led us to the progress in Poland that began in 1992. I say 1992 was the first year of the economic growth in Poland that has been continued for last decades and led us, to the economic success of the country.
But I imagine that was a very difficult. I think you're probably understating how difficult it was, because it's almost as if one system has to fall apart for another system to be rebuilt, and that time in between must have been a very, very difficult time.
We had, in our history, several uprisings, that failed against the Russian, and we knew that we shouldn't allow us to accept the bloodshed in Poland. It means that those changes should have been introduced, let's say, in another way. It means without any blood, from Polish side. And fortunately, it was the main substance, of this democratic and market transformation, that it happened without any victims.
That's an amazing story, because Poland had been through so much over the past 150 years before, I guess. So you are a person of faith. Talk a little bit about, if you will, if you're comfortable, how your faith has influenced, or where it has influenced your calling or your drive or your willingness to serve publicly for your entire life, pretty much.
Frankly speaking, I don't see the difference between the basis of the Christian faith and devotion to human rights and liberal freedoms. I don't see a difference if we accept, the value of human dignity, that is more important than all other values. And when we accept that human dignity is the source of other values. That's why at that time, when our minds, our souls are shaped, when we are 17, 18, or 19-year-old, such an influence of religion in my life was crucial. I don't want to say that the dissident movement and then, the huge movement of solidarity, that they were composed only on Catholics in Poland.
Yes.
Because there were different streams, especially, in this dissident group and other dissident groups in Poland. There were even, participants of anarchist
Yes, of
and
course.
other.
It was a coalition, I'm sure.
So it was a mosaic, it was a coalition, of people of various origins.
Yeah.
Then in the 80s, Polish Catholic Church was a crucial element of the support, for the underground activity. One couldn't imagine, our survival at that time without the institution of the church that supported, the opposition in Poland so strongly. Frankly speaking, again, it wouldn't be possible also without this umbrella, spiritual and political umbrella that we were receiving from the Pope. This involvement, personal involvement of John Paul II, it was a great time, for Poles in 1978 when he was elected. But then he opened this political and religious umbrella, over our heads. So his influence was crucial. And then, of course, the new winds came after 1989. So now Polish society is Catholic in its majority, but there are also others that are affiliated to other ideas. But what is basic, for us, it is, that we have in our hearts and in our minds, those values that are, once again, deeply rooted, with the respect for human dignity. And if you asked me, when you asked me about my spiritual sources, yes, Christian inspiration was absolutely crucial.
Yeah, we would say that the moral basis for the belief in human rights, the church would say, from a belief in God and the great commandments given. We think at the cathedral here that one of our roles now during this time in the life of our country is to do what we can to speak those values of the church into society and see it as so important. And appreciate you sharing the Pope and the importance of the church in those early days, because I do think that can be a powerful and important role that the church can play, not to play partisan politics in any way, shape, or form, but to support the highest ideals of a nation and a people. And absolutely, thank you so much. So we're going to have to bring our conversation to a close in a few minutes. I could talk for hours with you. I find you absolutely, Bogdan, your history and what you've contributed to be quite amazing. But just let me ask, how are the Polish people now? You all have done so much for Ukraine, opened your borders, received so many refugees. I know that perhaps not now quite as much, but there have been very difficult days. How's the mood? How are the Polish people?
My nation right now is afraid of the future of international institutions that are additional guarantees to our sovereignty and safety. I mean, the role in the future of NATO and of the European Union. We believe that this objective that we designed before and then we achieved, as I said before, I mean, the participation and full membership in those two institutions will bring not only us, but also you, necessary security. Because we don't have any difference between security of Europeans and security of Americans.
Yeah.
Because your security, to some extent, is connected with ours. And at least security of the United States is connected with a good relationship with European partners. We are absolutely sure that it was not only the past, but it is also the future. And from Polish point of view, security of my country is connected with independence of Ukraine. Security with independence. Yeah? We can be independent without secure Ukraine, but we cannot be secure without independent Ukraine. That's important. And this is the principle that all governments before, and the current government is that they are, believing. So from that point of view, the peace deal concerning Ukraine is absolutely crucial for security of Europe and security of transatlantic community. So we would like to be less afraid of the future and to see independent Ukraine, to see cohesion within NATO, and to see, also effective European Union. I understand that integration processes that had been began in the 50s in Europe, that those processes are not so transparent for Americans because there are too many institutions of the European Union, too many procedures of the European Union, etc., etc. But believe me, the European Union is crucial for stabilization of European continent. That's why the future of the EU is also one of the preconditions, for stabilization of the transatlantic area. And this is the reason that majority of Poles are in favor of European integration, in favor of Atlantic cooperation with the United States, and wait for the peace deal that would secure independence of Ukraine.
I couldn't agree more. Well, Bogdan, thank you so much for this time together. Friends, to have Dr. Bogdan Klich here with us today has been a great honor, a wonderful friend of the Cathedral, and a man whose history has many lessons to teach us as Americans, as sometimes I think we underestimate what it requires to be a free people. And I thank you, Bogdan, for giving us your time, and keep the people of Poland and you and your work in my prayers.
Thank you very much, Randy, for this invitation. Once again, I appreciate this opportunity to sharing my views with you.
Thank you for listening to Crossroads, and until next time, many blessings. If the digital offerings of the Cathedral enrich your daily life, please consider becoming a supporter today by making a gift at cathedral.org/inspire.